That's the beauty of capitalism and why the system works. If we vote with our dollars, if we vote with our attention.
Energy is the currency of life itself. If you have no energy, you can't even make the changes that you want to in this world. I've seen people with low energy. It is hard for them to just get out of bed in the morning. What would happen if I showed up to everything that I do with the highest intention, but the lowest attachment to what that gets me?
Today, I'm joined by Ste Lane, writer, creator, coach, host of Radical Health Radio, and someone who spent a lot of time exploring what it actually means to thrive as a human being. And I don't mean thrive in the way we usually talk about in business, not just producing more, not just earning more money, not just building a bigger life on paper or on social media, but actually feeling alive in the life you are building. Steve's story is fascinating. He grew up in a working class town in England, eventually found himself traveling through Southeast Asia for years, and along the way, his definition of success completely changed. He met people who didn't have the things many of us spend our lives chasing: bigger homes, nicer cars, status, titles, financial scoreboards, yet they all seemed connected, generous, happy, and alive. That experience broke open a much bigger question for him. What if success isn't about adding more? What if success is about reconnecting to what already is and what is real? And that's where this conversation really hits home for us as real estate professionals. Because in our industry, especially if you're in a city like Las Vegas, it's easy to get caught up in the artificial world: screens, notifications, contracts, client demands, market pressure, social media, production numbers, awards, comparison, and the constant feeling that we should be doing more. That's me. But hey, Steve isn't saying we need to abandon ambition. He's not saying quit your job, move to a farm, and give up the business you've worked so hard to build. Oh, that sounds tempting sometimes. He's asking something much more useful. Can we change our relationship with the race? Can we work hard without becoming hardened? And can we be ambitious without being attached? Also, can we build success while still protecting our energy, our health, our presence, and our peace? In this episode, we talk about food, energy, health, hustle culture, masculinity, spirituality, simplicity, and how to reconnect with the real world, even while living and working in a fast moving city. Steve shares a concept I love: high intention, low attachment, HILA. Show up with everything you have, do the work, care deeply, serve others well, but do not let the outcome become your identity. HILA. That idea alone is worth the conversation. So, whether you're a real estate agent trying to avoid burnout, an entrepreneur questioning what success really means, or simply someone who wants to feel more alive in your own life, I think this conversation will give you a lot to sit with. Let's dive in with Ste Lane. Welcome to Mindful Agent, where real estate success meets health, mindfulness, and personal growth. Join me, Michael Coxon, real estate broker, coach, and co-founder of Coxon & King, as I explore the intersection of wellness and business excellence, helping you thrive in both real estate and life. But yeah, it was your video about caring less
Yes.
that caught my attention on Instagram. And we'll get into that. But for those who haven't seen you, followed you, or listened to your podcast, Steve, what are you all about today?
What am I all about? Thriving as a human is what I'm about. I think a lot of us are surviving. I'm not sure how many of us are thriving currently. And my fascination has always been, how can we squeeze as much juice out of this human experience as possible? And that forces you to ask a lot of important questions about how do you define success and how do you want to spend your time and all of that stuff. But I don't just want an ordinary life. I want an extraordinary one. So I'm concerned with the human condition flourishing and trying to help other people achieve that for themselves as well.
Yeah, and it sounds like you maybe have a different definition of thriving. But you also mentioned just squeezing the most out of life, which to me implies a lot of action and doing
Mm.
and making things happen. How do you balance, thriving with a peaceful life?
Yeah, it's a good question. Peace is happiness at rest, is how Naval used to say it. So I define one of the metrics of success as being, how do you feel when you're alone with yourself? When the distractions of the world have gone and the work is done and you sit with yourself, how do you feel? Now, a lot of people don't sit with themselves, so they don't know how they feel. They think they sit with themselves, but when they sit with themselves, they're also scrolling or doing emails or watching Netflix. So I'm talking about the quality and the texture of your mind and how at peace you feel when you're truly alone in those moments of contemplation or silence. And interestingly, if you want to find peace, go to war with yourself, is an interesting little mantra I've thought about. So there's a pretty dedicated physical pursuit that I'm on in terms of fitness, where I train quite hard. And that is a way for me to exhaust the body and quiet the mind so that when I come into rest and presence, I'm a little bit more grounded, I feel. And then obviously, like you said, the work has to be done, right? We've got to do things in this world to survive. So to be more is a wonderful thing to strive for, but it has to be sandwiched between what we do in order to create the space so that we can exist and pay the bills and fulfill our role in society and all of that stuff. But what I've really been thinking about a lot is what Alan Watts used to call the Wu Wei, which is this art of effortless action. So it's not taking action, but it's not forcing too much either. Because when you force a solution on a problem, you just create new problems. So what that means is you've really got to listen to the things that you want to apply effort to. And the wanting is a very important piece of this, because if you want to apply effort to something, it means you can do really hard things and make them easier, which sounds counterproductive. Most people are living a life where hard things define us and discipline equals freedom and life's just got to be a grind until hopefully one day it's not. And I don't really buy into that. I think there are moments where you have to grind. I think there are moments where it's difficult, but I think you can approach it all with a kind of lightness. And that's what I'm really trying to help people think about and discover and work on myself is, if you are truly aligned in life with what you think, say, do, and want, then you will be able to do remarkably hard things in an almost effortless way. And it's hard
Mhm.
for the Western mind to wrap its mind around that, because we've just been sold that everything that you want is on the other side of an enormous amount of hard work. So it's this distinction between how hard it is, but how enjoyable it is at the same time. And maybe there's a part of you that can find a joy in what is difficult and an ease and a flow, instead of this constant, grind, suffering, and, over inflating the journey.
You are speaking to my soul, Steve, and that's exactly what this podcast is all about. And it's so much to think about. You introduced a concept from Alan Watts, the Wu Wei. Alan also talks a lot about non-dualism, the finding the good and the bad, the hard and the easy and the hard. And there is no such thing as hard without easy, and
Hmm.
there's no such thing as easy without hard. So if you want peace, you need to earn it and work for it to an extent. I think the American culture, the hustle culture, the real estate culture really pushes the work your tail off
Hmm.
until you get that success, and then you can be happy. And we know now, at least I do from personal experience, and it sounds like you do, that that's the wrong way to go about it. And for a lot of people, when you go that hardworking route, you burn out
Hmm.
and you start to fantasize about stepping away from the conventional path, maybe of American entrepreneurship or real estate hustle culture. But very few people actually do it. And I go through that. I'm in my journey. I'm curious, you seem to have stepped away from the conventional path. Tell us a little bit of backstory about where you came from and where you are today, and what made you go off that traditional path.
Yes. So, as a person that moved to America, I've now started to say this little cheeky thing that the new American dream is to have nothing to do with the old American dream. Like, the new one is really freedom. And it's funny because I always idolized America when I was growing up. I grew up in a very sleepy, working class northwest town in England. It was constantly gray. It was quite small minded, the kind of place that not many people get out. And I feel like I escaped. But part of the escape plan was actually interrupted by 4 years of backpacking. And the long story short of that is I met an American who I fell head over heels in love with. She's now my wife and mother of my children. And because long distance wasn't on the cards, we realized quite quickly that there's this other thing you can do called dropping out and traveling. It's known as backpacking. It's this wonderful thing where you can take a few $1,000s and stretch it for months and months and months if you go to places that are relatively cheap to live. So I met my wife at a summer camp back in 2013. I was a counselor. She was a counselor. We had a summer relationship. And she was going on this little trip at the end of the summer camp, and she invited me along. And again, to make a long story short, I said, I will come, but she was going for 4 weeks. I will come. What if we just like extended this though? I don't want to go home and then go back out for 4 weeks. Why don't we come back to camp next year? And what if we just travel until the money runs out and come back to camp? So that set us off on a 8-month long adventure through Southeast Asia.
Wow.
And on our combined measly camp salary, which probably was about $11,000, both of us. And I went home and sold my car and a couple of other things that I owned to bolster my savings, and we disappeared. Southeast Asia, we flew into Thailand. I was there 2 days before her because I didn't have much choice in terms of what flight I booked. So I booked like a 3-day connection through China. It was terrible. And I got there 2 days before my now wife, like having a mini panic attack. Like, what have I done? Have I blown up my life? Everybody's talking about building your career and, getting ahead in the workplace. And here I am, just because I was in love with this girl. Well, it turns out it was a great plan. And part of that really actually broke my brain on what I thought success was. Because what I experienced in a lot of these, especially when we got out of the cities of these countries, we went into these far-reaching villages and hard to get to places. I encountered a lot of people that from the Western point of view had nothing. The things that we deem luxury items, man, even the things that we deem necessary for just a mere existence, they didn't have. They didn't have anything like a cell phone or a Wi-Fi connection. The houses were made of recycled materials that had washed up on the land and corrugated metal and thatched roofing and all kinds of stuff. They didn't have any material goods, but they were very, very happy. They were very warm. They were very loving. So they seemed to me immediately to derive the sense of value from somewhere else that wasn't things and stuff and accolades and titles and money and cars and watches, which are all the things in my little brain when I was growing up were what defined success was. That's what I thought it was, climb the corporate ladder, have the biggest salary you can, and hopefully one day you'll have a lovely wife and maybe fill it with children, but you'll be rich. And these people weren't rich from the monetary sense, but they were rich in the currency of happiness. So having gone through that, and we did that cycle for 4 years, by the way. So we came back to the summer camp, would travel to a new country, come back to the summer camp. After 4 years of that, it's going to be very hard to reintegrate back into the normal Western culture of a job. So the only thing that I had at that moment is I don't want a quote unquote normal job. I want something that allows me to exhibit some amount of freedom and hopefully feel good about the work I'm doing in the process. So the seed was planted then. I wanted to do something of impact, and I wanted to do it on my terms. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I had a new definition of what success was also, and that kind of changed everything.
And what about these cultures, these people you spent time with, what made them happy?
I think they derived their intrinsic sense of worth and value from themselves. Like it was coming from inside of themselves, and things like connection to the land, cooking you a meal, sharing things with you. They were very giving. We tend to think that the more scarce of resources, the less likely it is to be shared. It was the opposite experience. Like these people had less and they were giving more. And it just like the reason I say it broke my brain is because I'd known people at home that had all of the things that were supposed to make a person happy, yet they weren't happy, just obviously. They might not have shared all the demons in the closet with me, but they were borderline alcoholics. They were incredibly overweight. You could tell they wasn't happy, but they might have had a Aston Martin in the driveway and a beautiful home and all of this stuff. And I'm going, these people here are way happier. They're kinder, they're more giving, they're welcoming me in. We didn't even speak the same language in many instances. And they had nothing and they were willing to give it all away. And you could tell they got a great sense of pride from that. So it just really,
Mm.
I think they were connected in much a different way. Now, interestingly, that also put me on a little bit of a spiritual journey too, because coming from the northwest of England, I left when I was like 22 years old. And up until that point, I'd never really had serious conversations about things that are hot button topics today, like religion and politics. It's just kind of the English way wasn't to sit around the dinner table and debate these things. And I went to a Catholic school and we had religious education, but I was never, it just wasn't like a huge part of our life. And then I went out to the East, but I saw this, especially in certain cultures, whether it was the Hindu offerings on the doorstep or, you know, watching the monks go out for the alms one day. And something awoke in me that was like, okay, these people are also very clearly connected to something beyond themselves, something transcendent. Now, it wasn't the monotheistic Christian God of the West. It was something else. They had different belief systems, and I got to experience all kinds of it. You know, Muslim over here, and Hindu over here, and Buddhist over here, and then Christian, and then everything else in between. So that also was something that was quite awakening for me, because I said, I want that too. I do want to believe in something greater, but I couldn't at the time because I wasn't resonating with it. So
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of reasons, but it was just very different. It was the definition of culture shock, but it hit me in the best way, I would say.
Yeah. So, you, I mean, you got to see outside of the traditional confinement of religious institutions, which to me was a big turning point as well, growing up Catholic as well, and the rules and the buildings and the classes and the course and the books and the strictness versus the lessons, where
Yeah.
I think the lessons matter most in Hindu culture and a lot of Buddhist traditions, and the simplicity of life. I mean, what about these cultures and your experience made you realize, like, hey, maybe we're overcomplicating life?
Yeah, everything, because it is, in a nutshell, the most simple existence in its purest essence. It was literally about, you could tell, I mean, these people weren't ever thinking about things like investment portfolios or 401ks or the health insurance plan. They were thinking about, could they catch the fish that day, and, you know, were the chickens laying eggs, and what resources they could work with from the land, like growing food and such. Now, granted, they live in a very different world than we do. So the things that we get suckered into and sometimes feel like we are freed by or shackled by, depending on who you're asking,
Hmm.
kind of a necessity of the Western way of living to a point, I think. But there are a lot of lessons in simplicity. And I actually think a lot of the, uh, whether religious teachings is the right term, or just philosophical ideas, that there is a wisdom in simplicity. Less but better actually often is the path to more freedom, not more. And I think we're actually feeling that as a culture in the West, that we were sold this false bill of goods, that basically materialism became the modern God. When Nietzsche said, you know, God is dead and man has killed him, I think he was alluding to that. Like, we'd replaced it with, you know, whatever you worship. If you want to know what a culture worships, look what they spend all of the time and efforts doing. And for us in the West, a lot of the time it's this acquisition of wealth for many people.
Yeah.
And that's what they worship.
I posted a video recently about there's a 30% rule in real estate that, you know, no more than 30% of your housing, of your income should go to housing. It's an old rule from 1969, I think it was first published, but I said, you know, that rule is bullshit. And the rule is, what are you comfortable with uh,
Hmm.
spending on housing? And that's all. Like, just because you can quote unquote afford more doesn't mean you should buy more. It's not
Yeah.
exactly where the happiness will come from. Maybe it'll come from taking a trip to Asia, or sponsoring a child, being a big brother, big sister, donating to charity, helping people out, playing sports, playing golf, whatever. Like, money doesn't, housing, a bigger house doesn't necessarily make you happy. And it's, I always am careful as a real estate agent. Well, that's how I make a living, right? Is people buying and selling homes. But there came a point where I said, I'd rather it would just be authentic with the message.
Yeah.
Long story short, I get a comment on TikTok about, oh, well, a bank will tell you what you can afford. They will loan you what you can afford. And I thought, that's so sad that somebody just thinks that's true and can't step back and say, well, a bank's job is to make as much money off of you as possible, and they will give you as much as they deem
Yeah.
necessary to gain the most amount of interest. Doesn't mean it's what you can actually afford. And the word afford is so subjective. So,
Yes.
like, I've learned buy the right house for yourself now and know nothing is permanent. Everything in life changes. You can always move again. And I think the pendulum is starting to swing back to, I always try to find the middle ground of, I know I'm not going to be growing my own food and have a chicken coop in my HOA community of Summerlin, Las Vegas. I know I don't have access to fishing. These things. I have grocery stores, and is that going to be enough for me? Like, how do I guess what I'm asking, integrate what you learned and perhaps how you live in Tennessee? I know you homestead. How does one integrate that into, say, a urban busy life?
Yeah, it's a very good question. But I think that you can participate in and with life in so many different unique manifestations. What I actually rail against in social media land is this over glorification of the homesteading life.
Mm.
You see all of these accounts basically positioning it as some kind of flex, like my beautiful wife in a white sundress milking the cows every morning. And the reality of it is it's scrappy and dirty and there's death. I mean, I've had 4 chickens lost this week to a predator. I had a tree fall on a chicken yesterday, fall right on her back, broke her dead on the spot. It's poop, it's fixing fences, it's animals getting sick. It's not the glamorous side that you see because social media, of course, portrays only the highlight reel and not the reality of it. The reason, though, it is so important for me is the only thing I am sure of in this life is that we are all sharing life.
Mhm.
That's about it. Everything else I'm kind of open to the mystery. What is the meaning of this? Is there a higher power? All of that. To me, I'm standing in awe under all of it, saying, I don't know. It's wonderful. This is what I feel. This is true for me. But I'm pretty convinced that we are all sharing life right now in very unique, different manifestations. And if we are sharing life, then we should be asking questions like, am I supporting the life around me? Because it's the only thing that's kind of concrete to me. And what that means is putting your money where your mouth is. We talk so much now about votes, with whether it's voting in the political races and who's going to get in office and who should be in Congress. But what about voting with our dollars? Okay, you can't grow your own food, but can you find time on a Sunday to get to a farmer's market? Can you use food delivery services that are practicing regeneratively? Can you go into the supermarket and, if it's in your budget, buy organic and regenerative as opposed to the conventional systems? Can you vote with your dollar? Can you vote with your choices? Can you vote with where you place your attention online? Are you going to watch mainstream media or are you going to go to independent media? Are you going to doom scroll and watch cat videos and nonsense and perpetuate hate? Or are you going to reclaim your consciousness? Everything we do is a vote. So I
Mhm.
think there's so many ways that even somebody in a urban environment, penthouse in New York City, desert in Las Vegas, we can all participate in life in our own unique way. And of course, just existing is participating in life, but I would say we want to do it more consciously. I think that's really what I'd like to have people do, is just think about what they are doing and why they are doing it, and ask the question, could I be helping to contribute to life a little bit more with
Mhm.
simple choices? And that might be, I don't know what that could be for somebody. It might be choosing to pick up their Amazon package from the local pickup spot instead of just getting things delivered every single day. It might be a food choice, it might be a health choice, but choice is really all we've got. And I think the more conscious we can be with all of our choices, I think actually the happier we'll be, because it gives us a sense of agency and meaning to really feel like we're being a conscious agent of stewarding life in this modern world, which I would argue one of the problems that we're all feeling is we're disconnected from it. We all know we're living a life, but we don't feel alive all the time. Like we're
Mhm.
participating with life. We almost feel like a drone in a big old machine that's just like being pumped out and told to make more money and feed the beast. And I think kind of breaking that spell a little bit is just more conscious decisions, be it around food, be it around
Yeah.
whatever.
When I look back and reflect on my own journey, I battled ulcerative colitis,
Mm,
nearly killed me. And when I changed my diet from, I grew up on the traditional like processed food diet of the 80s, and I'm very convinced that had something to do with it.
yeah.
When I started to eat a whole foods diet, it was harder to find food, especially anything packaged and
Oh yeah.
convenient, that was Whole Foods, and organic was much more expensive. And I look back, that was only 10 years ago. And I go to the grocery store today, and because many like me voted with their dollars and only bought there was only one brand of crackers that checked
Yeah.
all my boxes. And even though I didn't like it as much as the other ones, I bought it. And now there's 5 brands, right?
Yes.
You know, me and thousands or millions like me voted with their dollars saying, hey, this little brand here is doing well. Let's compete in this space. So that's the beauty of capitalism, like
Hmm.
that, and why the system works. If we vote with our dollars, if we vote with our attention, you mentioned social media, what are we engaging in? If the negativity of the news is bothering you, stop watching it. And if millions do that, well, they're going to change their tune and what they deliver to
Correct.
you, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that just that level of awareness is massive. And to your point about the health piece, this is why my vehicle for transformation, if you want to call it that, started with health and is still very centered around the physical health of the human being that I'm dealing with. Because health, what better way to define health simply to me than energy? That's what I say. Like if we want to take all of the blood work out of it, longevity, all these things, let's just call health energy. If you are low energy, you are low health. If you are high health, you will have high energy. Now, what is energy? Energy is the currency of life itself. It is the most abundant resource and the asset that you should want to protect more than anything else. Because if you have no energy, you can't even make the changes that you want to in this world. I've seen people with low energy. It is hard for them to just get out of bed in the morning. And I've been that person, and I've been the person with unlimited energy. Like right now, 36 years old, busy, professional, dad of 2 kids, homesteader. I have unlimited energy. And I don't say that just being facetious. I feel like I can just go and go and go. And it's not in this relentless, over caffeinated doing. It is this
Mm.
just, there is a vibrance about my being because I've protected it through food choices I've made now over a decade. And I came from a horrendous family history. I was overweight. By the time I was a teenager, both sets of grandparents on my mom and dad's side had passed away from diseases of chronic lifestyle, cancer, heart disease. My parents were heavy. We had the fat gene, quote unquote. We had the cancer gene, quote unquote. So I was terrified. I was looking down
Mhm.
the barrel of a really short life with self
Mhm.
consciousness and body issues. I had psoriasis. I had inflammation. I had a really bad gut health. My maybe TMI, but I could clear a room with my farts. They were toxic level. And at the time when you're
You and
18,
me
19,
both.
you
Okay,
you
this is
think
the
that's
same
funny. You're
thing.
kind of like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yep.
and then you
Yes.
wake up and you're like, wait a minute, that probably was a sign that I
That's a
was
bad
rotting from
sign.
the inside.
Yeah, that was
So,
me before I was diagnosed with colitis, so I get
yes,
that.
yes. So I went on a huge journey, and now I think that food and food sovereignty is so important because it literally breaks down in your body, and it's either going to build you up or it's going to downgrade you. Every bite of food you take is a chance to upgrade or downgrade your biological systems. So I
Yeah.
would say that think
Good
of
input,
every
good
bite.
output.
Bingo, bingo. Every bite is a short-term investment in how you feel, a mid-term investment in how you look, and a long-term investment in your aging and your freedom from disease. And I
Mm.
think if we actually thought of food in that way, it would change how we would approach it. Because right now, what we have is people that are just eating to what is convenient. And unfortunately, and I'm sure this exists across multiple spectrums, usually what is easy and convenient is not what is best for us. Whether that's an investment strategy or a get rich quick scheme or whatever, if it's easy and convenient, it's probably not the right thing. Now, the good news is it's getting much easier to eat healthy because of exactly what you said. A lot of people are waking up and voting with their dollars, and it's creating chain restaurants now that don't use seed oils anymore and that bring in organic produce, and there's better snacks. And now I can go into a supermarket, especially if I'm in a city and I go into a Whole Foods. It's so abundant now.
Yep.
10 years ago, you couldn't find a gluten-free bread. Now there's 6 of them on the shelf and all of this stuff.
Exactly.
So it's so cool to see what's happening. But still, as a good rule of thumb, it's usually when it comes to your health, it's usually about doing the hard right thing, which is going to create an easier life later because
Yeah.
everybody has 100 problems until they have a health problem, and then they only have a health problem.
Yeah. This is true. I you've been open about this on your podcast and others about dealing with orthorexia,
Hmm.
which is an unhealthy obsession with health, right? And now you have a much more balanced relationship with food. Like, how do you know when self improvement goes too far or even becomes self punishment?
That's such a good question. Well, yeah, I spent a long time there. I spent equal amounts of time on either ends of the spectrum where it was not thinking remotely about looking after my health, thinking I could just get away with eating whatever and not prioritizing sleep and just no regard for my body, like this beautiful gift that I have, and just treating it like a dumpster, basically. If I wanted to eat 20 chicken nuggets and 4 double cheeseburgers from McDonald's with a milkshake, I could. No big deal. But obviously, it had consequences. I just explained some of them to you. I had psoriasis. I was heavy. I was self conscious. I just literally wasn't piecing together that, oh, the quality of the food I put in my body really impacts how I look, feel, and perform. So when I
Yeah.
became aware of that, and I had a light bulb moment, which started with just an interesting self experiment. It was like, I'm just going to stop eating bread for 30 days. So I didn't eat
Right.
bread for 30 days. That's all it was. It changed my life because so much happened in 30 days. I think I lost 10 pounds, which probably was a lot of inflammation and maybe a pound or two of fat. My
Yeah.
knees, I was a 21-year-old with like knees that felt like I was 50. They were creaking and painful. My knee pain went away. I stopped farting. My energy cleared up. My skin was clearing up. So that was kind of the turning point for me of no going back. But then it got deeper, and the orthorexia is a very slippery slope because yeah, you start to feel better, you want more of that, but then you start to realize that the things that got you sick in the first place are still abundant in the food supply, and you've got to avoid them. And I think for a long time it's a sense of not being able to give up control and not trusting in the resiliency of your body, because you've become, you've led yourself to believe through results that it was the gluten that did all of this to me, so I now can't eat gluten. But then, you play that out to its natural conclusion, and then it's not just I'm gluten free, it's I'm refined sugar free. And then I don't eat seed oils or vegetable oils. And then I don't eat anything that's conventional or not organic. And then I don't eat any meat that's not regeneratively raised or humane. And all of a sudden, your handful of foods that you can eat are very limited, and you only have control over those in your own home. So
Yeah.
what happens to social situations? Oh, well, I can't do them. And for a while, I missed out on social situations. And I didn't feel like I was missing out as much as I couched it all in this kind of moral superiority that I was better than that. I'm better than to
Mm.
eat at these places. But really
Mm.
what it was, I was frustrated that people, had the maybe the ignorance is bliss kind of thing of when you know too much, it can backfire. And it turned into an eating disorder in a very productive sense. Now, this is an
Right.
interesting parallel here to the grind culture, the hustle culture, because what's celebrated is working more. Work till your eyes bleed. You can rest when you're dead. Do it all for your retirement. So something that is adaptive at first becomes maladaptive, and then it's celebrated. So people just keep doing it until they reach burnout. Well, it's not too far of a stretch to say this is very similar to what goes on in the health world. Get healthy, now get healthier, now get more shredded, now become more of a
Optimize.
purist until it backfires and you can't do anything because you're a control freak with an unhealthy obsession with health.
Yeah, I've definitely been there. I'm still in there. I experiment now. I just started taking peptides, which is all the rage. And, after deep research, talking with doctors and different professionals and other friends, I'm like, I'm going to try this, but I'm not going to try that. And I
Yeah.
started, I work with Life Force, which is like quarterly blood draws with over 50 biomarkers. And, it becomes a game and you become obsessed. I got a Whoop. I
Hmm.
track my sleep, the analytics, and my green, yellow, red. And I realized I got to be very careful with all this because my addictive personality, which used to be addicted to McDonald's, alcohol, and cigarettes, is now maybe addicted to my Whoop
Yep.
score. And
Yeah.
it's a wonderful problem, and I'll take it. But I'm being very mindful of like not letting it run my life. The food thing. I have a funny story to share. You made me think of. I took a food allergy test during my colitis recovery, and it said I was allergic to egg whites. And it's very common if you go to a breakfast, diner
Yep.
to say, yeah, I'd like egg whites. And, they will gladly upcharge you and do that. And I used to go and say, yeah, I'd like egg yolk scramble, remove the whites. And you want to get a funny look from a waitress or your friends when you're eating, order your eggs yolk only.
I love that.
And I did that. And I'm like, that was one of those moments where I'm like, this is just absurd. And have the whole egg, for crying out loud. Like, it's not going to kill you. And it was a very minor quote unquote allergy that appeared in a test that like frightened me, and changed me and made me weird and obsessive, one of many. And now I almost eat anything I want because
Yeah.
I think I know what I want, and I've experimented enough to know what's good for me and my body and what gives me the energy versus takes
Yeah.
it away. So, I mean, you and I have been on a similar journey. I think it takes years of experimentation. So I don't want to oversimplify it for anyone out there. But what are, in your words, the simplest health practices you think give people the biggest return?
Well, when it comes to food, let's start there because health is very 360-degree and holistic. But when it comes to food, it's something like the 80-20 principle, I think, is really useful for people. If you get it right 80% of the time, you give yourself the 20% of the time to flex and not get so neurotic and crazy, because what you do most matters most. And if we do a bit of math on like the 80% rule, let's call it 3 square meals a day, 7 days a week, is 21 meals a week. So if you nail 16, 17 of those, you're getting kind of close, and you give yourself 3, 4 meals to be a bit adventurous. Now, that doesn't mean you should go out and treat your body like a fairground where you're going to start, ramming just extra calories in, or maybe having this idea of a cheat meal, which I think is a really unhealthy mentality to have around food when you're cheating on your diet, because cheating implies you're doing something naughty to gain the upper hand, and you're not actually gaining the upper hand. You're just forming a very icky, weird relationship with food. I wouldn't moralize food as good or bad. I don't think, just because it's nutritionally devoid of nutrients and it's calorie dense like a pack of Oreos doesn't necessarily make it a bad food. It's not in there with a pitchfork about to stab you. It's just low grade information. But it takes away all of this weird guilt and shame that if I think it's a bad food and I'm eating it regularly, then I'm a bad person. And if I'm a bad person, what do I believe about myself and how do I see the world? And then I treat myself like a person who doesn't believe they're a good person treats themselves. So I do more of it. And that's how it becomes quite a destructive cycle.
The mind body connection too is so real. I recall, like, if I felt bad about eating something, it made me sick. And if I
Exactly.
was in a really good mood and I ate that same thing, I felt fine.
Yes.
And I was like, this is incredible. Like, I just ate that and I felt great. And then now for some reason it's making my stomach hurt. And I realized it was where my mind was. And if I was
Correct.
feeling guilt about it, like, the body keeps the score. It's a good book. And
Yeah.
it's a good saying that the body is paying attention to what's happening, and it's got strong connections. It's been proven, your gut to your brain. So, like, allow yourself that 20% treat, knowing,
Correct.
man, what did you just say about the more you do? I have to play it back myself, but if you do things most of the time, that's the direction you're gonna move into. Quick ask: if you haven't yet, hit follow or subscribe. It helps us grow and bring you even better content. Now back to the episode, and it was eye opening for me to realize I don't have to be perfect. This, orthorexia, I don't have to be obsessed with it. I just, like, need to do things right for myself most of the time.
Correct.
And that is the simplest health practice, is just make smart choices often. Is that
Yeah.
what you're saying?
It's exactly that. What you do most matters most. And the good
Yeah.
news about changing the food choices in particular is it's a very energizing cycle. If you can just stick with it through the stickiness of the first few days of habit changing or saying no to this and choosing this instead, and really understanding that what is hard now, number one, will get easier. But there's this dichotomy between hard now, easier later, and easy now, harder later. So the easy choice now is to keep going through the McDonald's drive-through. It's easy. You've done it a million times. It's cheap, blah, blah, blah. But
Mhm.
it's going to confront you with the harder choice later when you're in the doctor's office and you're 50 pounds overweight and they're saying like, hey, you've got some really scary blood work numbers here. So the harder choice now might be to drive an extra couple of blocks to go to the place where you can get more protein and fresher produce, for example. But it's going to create an easier life later because you're going to have the energy and you're going to be free from disease. So, to answer your question, which I never got fully around to because we got into the mindset side of things, is just eat, make that 80% of your diet, if possible, earth grown nutrients. Did it grow from the ground? Did it fall from a tree? Did it come from the ocean? Did it have eyes and a butthole at one point? Was it living and breathing? And the supermarket rule is very simple. Just shop the perimeters.
Mhm.
80% of everything that's in the middle is it's not even really food. It will give you some sustenance, but it's like frankenfood. It can sit on a
Yeah.
shelf for years. It can sit in a box. If you actually read the labels and you start to look at all that stuff and say, I don't even know how to pronounce half of these things. It's
Yeah.
not rocket science. You walk in, hit the produce, get the veggies and fruit that you like. I'm a huge fan of fruit in particular, and less so vegetables, although I'm not like the anti-vegetable guy, but if you think about the plant kingdom, There's a reason vegetables, we rarely get psyched about eating vegetables unless they're smothered with butter or oil and roasted in garlic or something like. But fruit, for example, it's the offering of the plant. It's
Yeah.
bright, it's easy to see in nature, it's sweet, it's very low in plant defense compounds because it wants to be spread. Whereas when you think about
Mm,
vegetables, they are rooted in the ground, they don't want to be eaten, they are bitter, they have high concentrates of things like oxalates and phytates, and things that basically ward predators off eating them, which are you and I. So I skew less towards vegetables and more towards fruit. And I'll carry on making my way around and I'll hit the butcher section and I'll look for the highest quality meat that I can find using this analogy of voting with my dollar, understanding that don't try and be perfect. If you can't afford the grass fed and finished right now, then get the conventional. It's still a huge step in the right direction from boxed mac and cheese. And then
true.
I'll hit the dairy aisle and get some good yogurt and some kefir and probiotics and some raw cheese. And I'll get, fresh squash juices and, some avocados, and Bob's your uncle. You're off to the races. I think people sometimes feel that that is so restrictive. But number one, it's delicious. I've been eating this way for over a decade, mostly eating things like meat, fruit, honey, maple syrup, raw dairy. I've never gotten bored. And nothing tastes as good as healthy feels. Like the health that I
Yep.
experience because of this is just what I can't imagine going back to these other foods. And it's no longer a willpower battle of like, oh no, I would really love to eat like crap every night. It's just gone away. I don't
You don't
even
want it.
desire that food. And if I do ever eat it, because now I've reached the point of ultimate food freedom where I know I could eat McDonald's if I wanted to, and I'm so resilient that
Mm,
it's not gonna mess me up for a week the way I used
yep.
to think it would. But I don't want it also. I'll happily go a little bit out of my way to find the grocery store and pick up
Yeah.
something from the
Or
back, you know?
miss a meal or miss a snack won't kill you
Yeah, God
either.
forbid.
A little
Yeah,
bit of
God forbid.
fasting would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so now that we've put some good food in our bellies, we've got a good energy. Let's shift gears to the now I'm at work, I'm at my desk, I'm an entrepreneur, and let's shift from the maybe to the neck up.
Mhm.
Uh, so in business, there's a lot of strategizing, thinking, planning, analyzing, and living in our head at work. Like, how do we get back into our body while
Mm.
we're doing mental strenuous work?
Such a good question. I'd say if you're living in your head, you might as well be dead. There's a time and a place for it, but you don't want to spend your entire life there. So it's about the seesaw effect. So there's a lot of cliches like we are not human doings, we are human beings. So I encourage people to stop singing the do 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 song. That's all that they do, and start singing the do be do song. Do be do be do be do be do be. You have to go up in the head because you have to do stuff, but you have to come back into the being. Because if all you do is do, you are going to lose who you be, and you're actually going to start thinking you are what you do, and that is a trip. You might actually start thinking and defining yourself by what it is that you do. When somebody says, Michael, like, oh, you notice in our culture, the first thing people want to say is like, what do you do?
What do you do?
And Ramdas used to say this was because we've all been enculturated into somebody training. Like what we're doing is posturing to figure out who's more of a somebody than the next somebody. So if
Mm,
I meet you and you say real estate and I'm only a barista, I say only in air quotes because in our cultural kind of somebody training, that's lower than. But what if I'm a brain surgeon? Oh, well, now I'm more of a somebody than the real estate agent. But it's all just a weird, fictitious game because we've over identified with what we do and less who we be. So I never ask people what they do anymore. It's a question I'm not
terrible
remotely
question.
interested in. I'm
When I
like,
get asked that, my current answer is when.
yeah, that's good.
I asked it back, what do I do when? In the
Yes.
mornings, on the weekends? Yeah, what
Yeah.
specifically are you asking? And people are like, oh, I mean for work. Oh, for
Yeah.
work. What I do for work is this, but that's
Yes.
not what I do or who I am.
Yeah. Correct. Correct.
Yeah, I read something recently about equality that was eye-opening, that every single person, the surgeon, the realtor, the barista, everyone is equal. Okay.
Hmm.
And a lot of people go, oh, no, you're not. This guy's only making coffee and this guy's saving lives. Well, yeah, we're all equal. It doesn't mean we have equal skills. It doesn't mean we have
Correct.
equal talents and equal contributions, perhaps to like saving lives or improving the planet, but we all do have equal worth
Correct.
no matter what. And that's how I like people to look at things. And in real estate, especially to tie it back, we're surrounded by scoreboards
Mm.
like production, volume, top agent, income, followers now. What
Oh
would you
yeah,
say to
add that one
somebody?
into the mix.
Yeah, I very, very humbly have a couple thousand followers at most across all platforms, but I always think a couple thousand people listening to a message like this is huge.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It beats the just my wife and my dog listen to me talk all day. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
so the number of followers is not at all a metric I care about. And to I've been successful in the production and the awards and the volume, but it's funny. My own sister says, "Well, how many houses have you sold this year?" And I go, "I actually don't know.
Hmm.
I know I have it written down somewhere. I track it, but I don't remember off the top of my head because that's not what I'm doing this for."
Yeah, love
So
that.
how do you tell somebody to, hey, you can still win on paper, but are you connected with yourself? What do
Mm.
you say to somebody who's maybe winning on paper but disconnected from themselves?
I have an acronym that I like to offer people, which is HILA, HILA, and it stands for high intention, low attachment.
Mm.
I think if we could adopt this in everything that we do, it would radically transform our lives. And the reason that I'm telling it to you is that it radically changed mine. What would happen if I showed up to everything that I do with the highest intention, but the lowest attachment to what that gets me? Because what I'm really doing there is I'm releasing the attachment to the thing that is what most people are getting suckered into as defining their worth. And that's the torturous game, because if I'm so attached to, I don't know, let's say I sold 10 last month, which means now I've got to sell 11 and then I've got to sell 12. It's just a relentless game of constantly going up. And if that's where I'm getting my worth or how successful I am solely from, it's a dangerous slope. It's very difficult. There's a lot of self-imposed pressure, and I probably end up living way too much in my head.
Yeah.
What's interesting is if I can just focus on working, it's a process to release attachments. I mean, it comes from Buddhism, and Buddha's four noble truths is the first one is dukkha, translated as life is suffering or life is ordinariness. The second law is that the cause of that suffering is attachment to people, to places, to time, to our bodies, to successes, etc. And the path out of that suffering is to work on releasing the attachments through the eightfold path. Now, it's the work of a lifetime, because we're kind of programmed at the level of the brain to get attached to things, because it's the the same bad trip for all of us is like we kind of believe that we are separate. I think that is the greatest illusion ever, that we're separate from one another. And if we are separate, then we are kind of in competition. And if I'm competing with you, then I need to sell more than you. And if you sell more than me, that I might put on a brave face and smile and shake your hand, but behind closed doors, I'm like, what's that? What's he doing? Like he's cheating or something like that. Because I've become so tied up in the game of keeping score. So I can just invite people to think about what would it look like to just focus on the HI piece, the high intention. What if I just showed up every day to be as diligent as I could be, as loving as I could be, as hardworking as I can be, all of the things, as present as I can be, to make choices that are more in alignment with my highest self. But what if I could do that and surrender the results and just let the chips fall where they may? What's
Yep.
really interesting is when people do the high HI piece, when they actually truly show up from the high intention piece and they put their energy on that versus the attachment piece, it's kind of remarkable because the results usually improve and they usually get more and do more and be more and all of these things by focusing on the intention and not on the outcomes. But we've got a culture of people focusing on the outcomes and not so much on the intentions. Now, one more addendum to that is the worst thing you can do is do high ha, which is high intention, high attachment,
Mm.
because now you're double whammying. Well, what I'm really going to do is secretly focus on this high intention piece because it will get me more. Because now you're stuck in the same game. And then what happens if it doesn't work? Oof. Now you're in a bind because you worked harder and you got less, and that's a very torturous place. And again, it's all a bad it's not a place where anybody can exist with lightness or presence or peace that you alluded to at the beginning of the conversation. It's a very like warlike mindset, constantly going to compete with this scoreboard or with the other real estate agents in your firm or in your district. Oh, she's got 10,000 followers now. How did she do that? What have I got to do? And all of a sudden your plate is just filling up with all of these other things that are putting so much pressure on you. And it's inhumane to do that to yourself. So it's hard. It's the work of a lifetime. I'm still doing it. I'm still
Yeah.
going through it. And there's always little hooks getting put in you. And you've got to see it and go, ooh, oh, I'm going to work on like unhooking that one. And you'll
The
have varying
attachment.
degrees of success to the attachment. But
Yeah.
if you can get there and if you can release, especially the big ones, like, because most people will know what they're most attached to, where they find most of their worth. And I think there's a fear in what it would look like to get rid of it, because a lot of people think that it is who they are. So if they lose that, well, who am I? And I would say that's the beginning of a great journey of really coming to know yourself. And it won't necessarily change what you do. What if you could be a better real estate agent with less attachment but higher
Mhm.
intention? I think that's totally possible for people, but
Yeah.
it's going to require some work, man.
You mentioned dukkha, which is the Sanskrit word that's translated often as like suffering, and that's a big debate, among scholars. There's one teacher named Michael Singer, one of my favorite
Hmm.
authors of the Surrender Experiment, and blanking the Untethered Soul.
Yeah.
He talks about the word suffering is better defined as perhaps like unease, because it's not like we're truly suffering. I think of suffering, right? Torture, pain.
Yeah.
It's really more like discomfort and unease and mental stress and
Yeah.
anxiety. I think, and especially translating to modern culture of anxiety, that is a form of suffering. So I like unease, and then attachment. Instead of the cause of suffering is attachment, he's saying the cause of unease is preference. He chooses the
Mm.
word preference. And I like that because attachment, again, people are like, oh, that's an extreme word. I'm not attached to the outcome, but you are. But but a softer way of saying it is you would prefer this outcome.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so like low preference, right? So let's say in real
Love
estate,
that.
like, yeah, high intention. I really want to get this sale, but I'm not attached to me getting a commission. I
Yeah.
prefer that, yes. But if I tie my happiness and success to achieving that preference, that's where I will feel uneasy or suffer.
Hmm.
And I just like that translation. It feels more 2026 to me and more
I like it.
relatable, because I never want to say I'm suffering, even though maybe I am. I never want to say I'm attached, even though maybe I am. But I definitely feel uneasy sometimes, and I definitely have preferences. And I've
Yes.
learned to let so many preferences go. I'm type A, I'm a bit OCD, I'm very neat. Like when things go out of order, it definitely bothers me. I can be reactionary to that, I've learned. And I realize it's because I prefer things in order that I feel uneasy if they're not. And that's simply a preference. And other people don't prefer order, they
Yes.
prefer piles or
Right.
mess. And that's how they operate. And again, we're equal. So my way isn't better. It's better to me, but it's not better. And that realization has been huge. And the one thing I want to add on top of that, it's not losing to give up your preference. It's not
No.
saying you give up entirely on what you want to occur. You keep that high intention that you talk about, but you let go of the attachment to it happening, and just having that attention and striving, that I have found to be gratifying when you
Yes.
just let that result go.
Well, I think also, and that was beautiful, very well said. And I think what you're talking about there is this letting go of preferences is not a loss. It is fundamentally the difference between acceptance and resistance. And this is a game changer to think
It's a
about,
win.
because most people are living their entire lives in the energy of resistance, which means that they're arguing with reality.
Yeah,
And if you argue with reality over your preferences, unfortunately, you lose every single
you
time.
lose.
And I don't know about you, and I don't know about most people, but I don't think we like losing. Yet
No.
most people are doing this to themselves because a preference didn't go their way, or something. They're saying things like, well, she shouldn't have done that, or he shouldn't do that, or the market, or they're pointing these fingers of blame and complaint, and they're saying that something that has happened shouldn't have happened,
Mm.
when that's a moralistic judgment or a preference. But the truth of it is, it should have happened exactly as it happened because it happened. And any other mental exercise to say that it shouldn't have happened is a complete and utter fight with reality that won't change anything other than increase your dis-ease, then increase your suffering, then increase the abundant lack of your preferences being met. So the goal here is to acknowledge that when your preferences aren't going quite your way, don't resist that, because what you resist persists and you're going to make it a bigger thing than it needs to be. Actually accept that.
Mm.
And when the acceptance comes is when the adaptability arrives. If I accept that I am not having my preferences met right now, then instead of just cursing the world or bad luck, I say, that kind of stings. That kind of sucks. What can I do about it? Where can I show up differently?
Mm.
Where can I work on letting go of these preferences if that's what's being called for? How can I look at this as an opportunity in disguise? What if this bad thing is actually good training? And what if it's awesome that it's happening now because it's better preparing me for then?
Yeah.
What if all of this stuff is just a giant mirror? What if
If you
life
could,
itself is a mirror?
it is. I think that might even be the meaning of life. And if you can ask yourself those questions that you're asking of yourself, and I like to add, can I just accept this? You've learned something, or ultimately, you've achieved peace, which
Peace.
isn't that the true win?
That's what everybody wants, I think,
I think.
at the end of the
Um,
day.
you we go on and on. I want to talk about one more topic you talk a lot
Yeah.
about to tie this in. You talk about masculinity and personal evolution. And I think there needs to be a redefinition of masculinity. I think a man who finds peace and is stoic is more masculine than one who gets angry and empowers themselves over others.
Mm.
What does healthy masculinity mean to you? And where do men confuse toughness with disconnection?
Lovely. Head, heart, balls. Head, heart, and balls, all in alignment, all working together. The head is clear. You use the mind for what the mind does: strategy, thinking, planning. You don't get lost in there. Our culture has become extremely heady. Like I said, live in your head, you might as well be dead. But you train the mind, you discipline the mind, you use it as an ally. It is a terrible servant. Sorry, it is a terrible master, but a great servant. What we want it to be is an ally. We want it to be a servant. Now, they say the longest journey a person will ever take is the 12 inches between the head and the heart. So next comes the heart. What does that mean? This is where men struggle a lot. What does it actually mean to live from your heart space? What does it mean to be connected to your heart? What does it mean to speak your truth? If the head is the place where we think, the heart is the place where we feel, the gnosis, the knowing. When something hits you and you're like, oh, that's like a ton of bricks. It's bypassing the head. It's going straight to something deeper, like it's stirring your soul, your bones, your heart, your being. There's a gnosis in here. And I would say actually that, this place, and sometimes we call it, a gut feeling or intuition. This place is what we should be letting steer our lives more than what's between our ears. But because our brains and our minds and our self-talk take up such a dominant space of our awareness, we sometimes let the brain win,
Mm-hmm.
which is why it needs training. Because just one more point I'll make about the beautiful burden of having a mind is that it is a prediction and protection machine. Fundamentally, it is trying to protect you from a painful past by attempting to predict the future. And of course, nobody can predict the future. So what it usually does is uses models of the past to apply them to the present in an attempt to predict the future, which usually means you stay the same. You repeat the same cycles, the same mistakes, even if those are destructive, which is why in the therapy world, it's often said that people would rather choose a familiar hell than the potential of an uncertain heaven, because it's the uncertainty that the mind cannot be in. The mind cannot coexist in this space of the unknown. That's why you've got to come to something different. You've got to trust. You've got to come to the heart space. You've got to come into your being. You've got to get below the neck and trust. So head and heart, these two in sync together, well, now you're on the precipice of becoming a world beater. But we forgot the balls, and this is where the man comes in. This is this energy. This is this life force. It's very outward. It's very much about using our energy to penetrate into the world, the beautiful things and the beautiful gifts that we have, not to be all balls disconnected from head and heart and basically forcing yourself onto the world in a very unaware way that damages people or leaves people less than you found them, but in an aligned way. Because I think a man operating in alignment with that, who's got the courage and the drive and the vril and the chi to go after, to do these things, to actually put it into practice. Now, I use this analogy for other people too, but just because it's stickier for the masculinity piece, but that analogy works beautifully well if you just say head, heart, and hands. The head and the heart are the same story. And the hands is basically, what are you going to do about it then? What are you going to create? Because you can have the best ideas in the world and the biggest heart in the world. And these two could be in sync together. But if nothing changes, nothing changes. If you don't do it, if you don't actually take the action, then nothing will change. So I think most men, when they're honest with themselves, can identify one area where they're breaking down. And in my experience, a lot of the time there's a wounded heart in there, or there's a lack of courage, or there's just an over-identification with the mind, and they're living in their head, and they're thinking life to death instead of living life, or over-intellectualizing it. But I think as men, we've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot to answer for, and we're not gonna create a more beautiful world that I think we all know is possible from the same paradigms that created this one. And I think the dominator culture in general is has largely been, especially like the modern culture that we live is largely a patriarchal force. And I'm not like down with the patriarchy or anything like that, but I think it's a very unconscious level of masculinity that has made a lot of decisions and kind of steered the world that we live in now. And I think it's time for a more integrated masculinity, a more holistic masculinity, and one that is not afraid of the feminine, that gives them a worthy seat at the table as the literal creators of life on this earth, all of life on this earth, the mother earth that we all walk upon. And too many men are afraid of that, concentrate the power and power systems in politics and banking and all of these things that have got pretty sordid history with this hyper concentration of the elite few at the expense of the many, which usually comes from the masculine. And that's not an aware integrated masculinity. That's a fragile boy level mentality that is ultimately afraid. World leaders are scared little children a lot of the time. When I look at them, that's how I feel about them. And this new wave of masculinity needs to reclaim the strength and the courage and the honor and that warrior energy. Like, be strong, be brave, be dangerous, but not a danger. Like, have your balls if needed. Like, be a protector and provider, but don't just be that. Like, all this rah masculine, I lift weights and I shoot guns. Cool. Like, if that's your thing, do that. But where's your heart, man? Where's the truth? Where's the depth? Where's that beautiful brain of yours? And where's the marrying of all of these three things together? Because if we can, that's the integrated man. And I think for the integrated man is more needed now than ever.
Amen, Steve. You've dropped a lot of wisdom on us today. Deep, lots of thoughts to think about and actions to take place. I appreciate you. Very wise words. And with that, we're going to move into Quickfire Wisdom. These are the same 5 questions we ask all of our guests. Number 1, what's the one habit you've developed that's made the biggest difference in your day-to-day life?
I'll be cheeky and I'll give you 2. I'll give you one for the physical, which is the food. We talked about it kind of ad nauseum, but upgrading my food upgraded my energy in unparalleled ways. And the second I'll give you for the energy body or the mind, it was meditation. Meditating every day for 3 years straight changed my complete inner realities. And both of those things together, you take one or take both, but they were profoundly impactful for me.
Perfect. We'll allow it. 2 good habits, meditation and the food you're putting in your body. Do those 2 things, you're going to have a much better life. Second question, do you have a favorite quote or mantra that you live by?
The cave you fear to enter has the treasure you seek. That's a
That
quote by
like
Joseph
Rumi.
Campbell.
Sorry.
I love Rumi. Rumi's amazing, but that's a Joseph Campbell quote. The cave you fear to enter has the treasure you seek most. Basically, that thing that you're terrified of is where the proverbial gold is. Go there. Fear is not something to run away from. It is a compass pointing you towards your great treasure.
Beautiful. Number 3, which book has played a significant role in contributing to your personal growth?
This was so hard because I'm such a big reader, but I think the one that actually moved the needle for me the most was The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, all about resistance. And it's so good. I encourage everybody to read this, especially personally, professionally, spiritually, everything. It's so good.
That was a good one. Nice choice. And the first time it's been mentioned on the podcast. So
let's go.
Gold medal. Number 4, what's your favorite app or tool for productivity?
I'm going to break the rules here because it's not an app or a tool. It's grounding.
That's a
It's
tool.
grounding. It's
We'll
putting
call
my
that.
bare feet in the grass. It's putting my bare feet in the grass and taking a few deep breaths. And there's no better productivity tool than having fun.
Nice. Another double answer, but I'll allow it. Unless
It's hard to
grounding
get
is
me on
fun.
just one, man. Simplicity and conciseness is not my jam if you haven't picked that up.
Yeah, I know. This is always tough because I mean, we talk about non-dualism. Nothing's black or white. There's no one
Yeah.
answer. So to try to wrap up not even years of experience, but millennia of spiritual thought in a quick answer is tough. So definitely feel free to add more than one. But the last question of the day, what's your go-to way to unwind after a long day?
It would be playing an instrument.
Ah, yeah, another layer to the onion that is Ste Lane. What instrument do you play?
If you're watching on video, you can see over my left shoulder. There's something up there that people often think, "What are they? Are they swords or something?" Those are Native American flutes. So I love the flute. It's a two. It's a double whammy for me because the sound is beautiful. It's a very easy instrument to play. It makes you feel like you're being transported to an ancient, beautiful time. But it's cheeky breath work. You're just constantly
Mm.
slowing those exhales down, and you're really slowing down and regulating your nervous system too. So beautiful sound, and also I think physiologically very beneficial too.
Yeah. I've never thought of it that way as breath work. That
Hmm.
sounds like a nice way to end the day and a nice way to end the podcast. Steve Lane, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah, best place is just through social media channels if you're on those, and that's the Ste Lane. Ste is just STE, Lane, LANE, the Ste Lane. And then I have a podcast of my own called Radical Health Radio. So you can find me yapping through any of those channels, and that will take you anywhere else you want to go, whether it's to the Substack or inquiries about nutrition, guidance, all of that fun stuff. So Ste Lane on all social media channels and Radical Health Radio on podcast worlds.
Thank you, Steve. Until next time, take care.
Thank you very much, man. It was a fun conversation. Thanks for inviting me into your world.
For today's mindful moment, I want to come back to something Steve said that I think every agent, entrepreneur, and high achiever needs to hear: high intention, low attachment, HILA. That's such a simple phrase, but it carries a lot of weight because most of us don't struggle with the high intention part. We know how to care, we know what we care about, we know how to work hard. We know how to show up for clients, solve problems, negotiate, follow up, post the content, study the market, lead the team, answer the call, and push ourselves to get better. The problem is not always effort. Sometimes the problem is attachment. We attach our peace to the deal closing. We attach our confidence to the client choosing us over the other agent. We attach our self worth to the number of homes we sold this year, the award we did or didn't win, the followers we do or don't have, or how we compare to the agent standing next to us. And that's where the suffering starts. Or maybe suffering is too big of a word, like we talked about. Maybe it's unease, tension, anxiety, discomfort, pressure. Are these feelings that you're familiar with? I mean, these feelings are in my chest sometimes when reality doesn't match the outcome that I've preferred. And let's be honest, real estate gives us plenty of opportunities to practice this. How about if the buyer ghosts you? Or, as I said earlier, the seller chooses another agent to list their house, or the escrow falls apart. The market shifts, happens all the time, happening now. Maybe your video didn't perform or your podcast. The deal you thought was done suddenly isn't done, a hiccup. And in those moments, the mind wants to argue with reality. The mind says, this shouldn't be happening. They shouldn't have done that. I deserve this. I'm the better agent. I should be further along. I should have saved more. I should have more by now. But as Steve reminded us, when we resist what's happening, we lose our ability to adapt to what is happening. Acceptance is not weakness. Acceptance is not quitting. Acceptance is not saying you don't care. Acceptance is simply saying, this is what's here. Now, how do I want to respond? That's where your power comes back. So here's a simple practice for this week. The next time something doesn't go your way in business or in life, pause before reacting. Take one slow breath and ask yourself, can I bring high intention to this moment without attaching my identity to the outcome, without attaching my emotions to the outcome? This isn't low effort, this isn't low care, and this isn't low standards. This is high intention, low attachment. Show up fully. Do the right thing like you intend to do. Tell the truth to your clients, to the other agent. Serve the client, serve the other agent. Make that tough call. Learn the lesson. Then let the outcome move through you instead of becoming you. You are not defined by what happens after that, because you're not your last closing. You're not your mistake. You're not your last rejection. And you are not your production number. And you are not the market. You are not your success. You are the awareness behind all of it. And when you remember that, you can still be ambitious, still be excellent, still be successful, but you can do it with more peace. And maybe that's the real work we're here to do. Not escaping the race and starting the farm, but changing what the race even is. This is your race. Stop doing it in other people's definitions. If you want to learn more about this topic and these principles and how they apply to your life, your business, or a specific challenge you're facing, I do encourage you to book a free call with me on michaelcoxon.com and grab some free resources while you're there. Until then, know that I've got your back. And remember, success starts within. Thanks for joining me on this journey today. I'm Michael Coxon, and this is Mindful Agent. Join me next time as we continue to explore the intersection of real estate, health, and mindfulness.